Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing.
Welcome, everyone, to Morning Magazine for this April 28th, 2021. Your host, James J. Malouf here. And today at 10:30, we're going to be joined by our friends at the ODC. Looking forward to that. Right now, we have in studio with us Lance Pliml, Wood County Board Chairman, along with our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. I want to say good morning to Kevin, the gang over there. Lance, good morning. How are you?
I'm great, James. How are you today?
Doing good. How have you been holding up?
I've been holding up just fine.
Good. Good to hear.
Things are going pretty well. There's always in everybody's life, there's that day-to-day crisis, but generally speaking, things are pretty good.
If I ask you tomorrow, it might be a little different answer. Today, it's this answer.
And
I hear you.
Right before we went on the air, we talked a little bit about that. Decisions are made every day. And if I knew today what I'm going to know tomorrow, I might have made a different decision. And I think the whole basis of good governance, and that's, kind of why I'm here today, is to say that when you get that information, you ought to adapt. And you can't keep that, your head stuck in the sand kind of model and say, no, that's what I believed yesterday, because things change. Information's king, and, you try to get as much as you can.
Yeah, it's very incredibly well said. Way to start the show, Lance. Nicely done.
Thought I'd give you a little segue.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well done. You're so right on about that. That coming back to personal responsibility and adaptability. Those two things are hand in hand so much right now with going forward here and everything that's going on. I want to start with a fun thing here because our parks are going to be opening up, and that is really exciting for a lot of people, especially with some of these guidelines changing up and such.
Yeah, starting, Friday, our campgrounds are open. This early in the season, you have somewhat, minimal use because weather is iffy, although this weekend's supposed to be mid-70s, I believe, or low 70s. It also can be 30 this time of year, so you never know. But we do have some reservations out there at South Park, out in Dexter, North Park. We are seeing some campership. Last year we had a record year. I don't know what this year will bring. There are some private campgrounds that are reopening. The state is opening some of theirs, and last year those were all closed. So we benefited greatly from that. I'm hoping that they had a great experience here and they do that. And then I kind of segue this back to you, but one of the things we'd like you to do is go to the online registration at the Wood County website. And then I'll throw it back to you because you wanted to talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, again, you are on point today. I do want to mention that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but I want to encourage people to go to co.wood.wi.us/county board. That is not only where you can find out all the information that's going on with our Wood County Board of Supervisors, the work that you guys are doing. It's also a way to interact with you guys, to find out about future meetings. It's a really valuable site, incredibly informative. It's where I get most of my homework done for our interviews, Lance, or talking with our mayor or these kind of things. Just encourage people to do that, especially I know that one thing that I hear from listeners, whether I'm talking to one of our representatives or our mayor or yourself or something like that, is, well, how do I reach you guys? Or how do I bark, bark, bark. I want to be heard and that kind of thing. Because we all want to be heard. And we're Americans. We deserve to be heard. That's kind of the birthright that we believe we have in all this. The only way to be able to be heard is to reach out. You've got to reach out. You've got to meet you guys halfway. And this is one of the ways of doing that. But before you reaching out, I encourage people to be informed, to find information and everything, and not just go off the cuff. It is a great site. Again, co.wood.wi.us/county board. And that's also the site you can go to sign up for campgrounds and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if you don't remember, that address, you can certainly just use a search engine, Wood County, Wisconsin. It'll get you there. Yeah, from departmental issues, they're all there. It's updated regularly to, the pandemic updates, the COVID website, when our parks are open, shelter reservations, what's available, and keep that in mind. As we're seeing the economy ramp back up again, we do have availability in some of those shelters and some of those open shelters closed, for those gatherings, provided you abide by all the other safety.
I always like to,
out there.
I always like to get to this point too, that when you're doing those kind of things, you're having fun, you're going camping and stuff. You're investing in your community too. You're putting money into your community. You're adding to that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. There's bundles of money that have come into governments. And they're printing. It doesn't really exist. I mean, money's being printed. Obviously, there's a huge debt that's going to be. But one of the things that this has been, supposed to be allocated for is lost revenue. And let's take Wood County as an example, because I think we have one of the best health directors in the state, if not the best. And the guidance we've had, and I've heard this from superintendents of our school districts, I've heard it out there from other community leaders, mayors, village presidents, town chairs, is they've done a phenomenal job. That being said, our sales tax revenue was actually up last year. Our early anticipation was it was going to be down, and it was up a little bit. Our property tax revenue came in, as expected and on target. And yet there's a large bundle of money that is supposed to be used to replace lost revenue.
Right.
Well, we don't have lost revenue at that level. We have a tremendous difficulty right now finding, we talk about unemployment. We can't find enough employees right now. I've had conversations with some pretty big businesses, that are their biggest concern is they can't find people to manufacture. And if they can't, then they may have to shut down or relocate. So it's a tightrope. We walk it every day. And it's, like you said, trying to balance safety with the economy, with education, making sure those kids are, getting the best education they can and moving forward.
Yeah, you kind of took things in a completely other direction on me on that one. So I got a lot of follow-up questions, but I'll stick
I'm
with
sorry,
the part.
there's
No, that's okay. That's
no follow-up
okay.
questions.
I was going to say though, you don't want. I don't know if you want my follow-up questions.
No, follow up.
I do think that it is this interesting thing that we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of this pandemic and some of these funds that we're getting and everything and what to do with them. For the communities that are fortunate like ours, there are other ones where they allocated these funds for a reason because these communities need them. Not everybody's like us, and to use a blank kind of slate over everybody wouldn't work. But that's what they've had to do with this. There is no going to every single area and telling you what to do with this money, or you only get this amount of money, and you guys don't get any, that kind of thing. It's interesting how things are going to play out from this with all of that.
Well, and that's where you'd like to see them take, in effect, the sideboards off of what you can use this for. You have heard, if you're listening to the news, different definitions of what infrastructure is. Well, I would consider that certainly, roads, bridges, broadband.
The traditional meaning of it.
Well, we already have a broadband project that we started in Wood County ahead of this because we recognize that need. We recognize it from an education perspective, and we recognize it from a telemedicine perspective. And we knew we had to get going on this. So we started. Now, Wood County is going to have about $14.1 million allocated for infrastructure. But right now, the government's take on infrastructure doesn't include roads. So I'm not sure how we handle that. And then you talk about that $14.1 million. Well, certainly some of that can be used for broadband expansion and improvement. But the state also got $3.2 billion, of which the governor's office has stated, at least in a meeting with the lieutenant governor a couple weeks ago, that some amount of that is going to be dedicated to broadband. Well, if they're going to allocate some of that for broadband, I don't want to use the 14.1 and then not be able to backfill it. It'd be really nice if they said, here's an amount of money, whatever it is, use it to better your community in whatever way you find appropriate. The problem is they're saying, here's the money. It's coming, half of it's coming May 11th, I believe is the date. But we don't have all the rules in place as to what you can do with it. But you have to spend it by the end of 2023. That's kind of tough. I mean, can you imagine somebody giving you somewhat of a windfall, saying, yeah, James, here's the money, but we don't know what you can spend it on, but you need to spend it in 2 years.
Feels like
years.
a more darker version of Brewster's Millions or something like that, where you got to spend this amount of money in 24 hours or whatever, that kind of thing. Do you think that because again, it's easy to really pick on government and pick on officials and the higher ups and all this kind of thing, but do you think that a lot of this is coming from some of this confusion, or some of this maybe not the logistics aren't correct with some of this, is just being not only overwhelmed but wanting so badly to get funds out to people as soon as possible, and trying to that being leading the charge instead of maybe being more calculated with some of this stuff?
Absolutely, I think you hit it on the head there. You'd like to see a more surgical approach to how this happens, and sometimes there's that thought: if I just throw a whole bunch of money or capital at it, the problem will go away. I get in trouble for things I say at times, but there's grants we get, for instance, for law enforcement. And those grants might be specific to seatbelt enforcement. Well, I can tell you what, I can make our community much safer using that money in other areas of public safety than I can worrying if somebody's wearing a seatbelt. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think you should put your seatbelt on.
Right.
But I'm generally thinking that, in today's world, if you don't know you're supposed to wear a seatbelt, I don't know exactly what you've been doing. It's kind of like when I get on a plane and they go, here's how you buckle your seatbelt. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. We've took that.
Right.
That's one of them. But there's other things in, whether it be drug enforcement, whether it be other avenues of public safety, whether it be training for officers, that it would be better allocated for. I think the overarching thought, though, is if I throw enough, capital at it, that I'm going to solve problems.
Yeah.
And yet they don't take the tether off someone and they say, here's the money, but we don't know what you can spend it on yet.
Right.
So it's difficult. And, we spend days, a number of days every couple of weeks just looking at what are the rules, how are they changing, how will it get better, and where can we do this? And we have those calls with county officials across the state, executives, administrators, boards, and then we've worked with, one of the things I want to touch on is I've tried to work with some of the local government leaders because communities don't end at specific borders where local units of government draw their lines.
Yeah.
So obviously, what benefits Grand Rapids probably benefits Wisconsin Rapids, Buren, Nakusa. And so we're trying to meet with some of those people and say, how can we pool some of that money? How can we leverage it? How do we make those projects that cross those borders, come to fruition? So those conversations are all happening. And that brings back to the website and your comment on, I love when I get those calls and that contact and be able to discuss those issues with people. That's how we derive the best ideas that we have.
I appreciate the transparency whenever we're talking, Lance, and it also speaks to that last part of what you said there, that the only way for you to be able to do your job at the best of it you can is to hear from the community, is to know what the community needs are. You are a community member, you're a part of society and everything, but you're not in every neighborhood. You don't live in every neighborhood. You don't live in every area, so you don't know, and that's why it's so important for people to reach out with feedback and giving you people like yourself, other board members, our mayor, all these things, feedback. And it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a difficult chain of events here. It's just simply sending a couple of lines of, hey, this street is bad. We could really use construction here. I don't know, just things like that. It's not a hard thing to be able to do.
Well, that's where information's king.
Right.
And like I said before, with more information, you tend to make not just a better decision, but maybe a different decision. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things that, the people who've seen, or listened to this show or other places where I've spoken, there's a couple of things that I try to do, and that's, never say never, never say always.
Yeah.
Adapt to whatever those changing conditions are. And then the full realization that, and especially for me, every day, the more I learn, the more I realize, the less I know.
Yeah. The smartest people I've known in this world know that sometimes they're dumb. Sometimes they don't know everything.
And if somebody says to me, there's, in real transparency, there's a homeless problem. Mm-hmm. Well, frankly, I'm not out at times often where I would see that.
Right.
Or in areas where I would identify that.
It's a great example.
And that's where you need to have that input from the public. And, I always say my favorite people are in a meeting are the ones that, there's two of those. The one that asks the question I can't answer, that always amazes me. And then, not that I can't come up with something, but that I really have to think about it. And then, even more importantly, the one that asks the question that I didn't even think about the question.
Yeah.
And then you always have to go to the consequence and the unintended consequence of those decisions. The tough part, if you sit in the chair of a supervisor, a mayor, an alderman, or whatever, is you have to live with those decisions. And people don't remember the 100 good decisions you made. They remember the one bad decision. And then the differentiation between, I think, the person who does a good job in office and the bad one is the one who's willing to say, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
We really should have looked at this from a different perspective or for more perspectives, and then be willing to change.
Yes. It seems like, especially politically going forward here, that is where whatever side of the aisle you're on and everything, politics is going. It used to be, I remember as a kid, that's a flip-flopper. You can't flip-flop. Nowadays, people respect that. They respect not so much the flip-flopping, but the adaptability of, okay, I got new information, now I think differently about this subject. Just being able to adapt to situations and just having a free mind, having a mind that is capable of being able to evolve and think bigger and, about things that aren't just about yourself or in your little bubble, that kind of thing. I have to admit, though, Lance, I'm a little distracted because, I didn't know that you talk to other people, that you do other interviews like this. Did you know this, Kevin, that he cheats on us? I had no idea. I'm kidding. It's important. It's great that you do those things. It's great that our board members do these things, that our mayor does this kind of stuff, multiple interviews, these sorts of things. Other, interviewers are going to ask different questions. That's important. It's one of the things that I think I heard you talking with Pam a little bit about, of how much you enjoy this, but how vital it is to the job.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems you have with, I'll call it partisan politics. I mean, everybody, even myself included, there's a philosophical bent to everything.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's a reality. And, and I can be, way over one direction on what my philosophical belief is, but then there's the reality of how do I make something come to fruition that's a good solution, albeit not a perfect solution. And that's the hard part. The further you get from local government, the less that thought process, exists.
Yeah.
And the closer you get to the philosophical bent. I can't go there because my party won't let me.
Right.
And I'm going, but it's not a good decision.
Yeah.
And yet if you step out of line, you don't have the ability to weigh in on any other issue.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
And that's I'll call it the beauty of local politics.
Yes.
They're nonpartisan. Everybody has a belief one way or the other.
Sure.
But typically, you're close to the constituency, you can listen, and you hope at the end of the day you craft the best solution to the problem.
I talk with other people that do similar work that I do.
You talk to other people too? Just a minute ago you're accusing me of cheating. Now you're telling me you're talking to other people.
Walter, let's set you up on that. People who do interviews with other politicians and those sorts of things, and I feel so spoiled in this area because no matter who I'm talking to, it doesn't matter. I don't have to look if they have an R or D in front of their name. They're thinking about their community. They're not on this extreme end of one side of the aisle or another or anything. They're in this gray area, this middle ground where they see the world as it is nowadays, where you have to be adaptable. Some things are going to fit party lines, some things aren't. And what matters is not party, people. It doesn't matter all that stuff. That stuff is over here and there. It's just cool to be able to talk to people like yourself, like other representatives we have around here. We have Congressman Kine coming in the other day, tomorrow. People like that. We're fortunate in this area and in this particular station to have that kind of thing. Before we let you go, I did want to make sure that we talked about the solar paneling project.
Yeah, we've got a huge project going on. This project started a number of years ago with Savion. They develop solar projects. This is going on. If you drive south of Wisconsin Rapids on Highway 13, you're going to see some of the logging occurring down there. This is a roughly, I'm using round numbers, a 1,500 acre project down there, 150 megawatts, which to put that into perspective would power 30 to 40,000 homes. So that's going to be interesting. And I think that having the availability of alternative energy sources is really good. And then I look at the practical side of things too. One of the moves you've seen, congressional action taken on to some extent is electric vehicles. Yeah. Not a bad idea in most cases. But I can tell you right now with the technology we have, that would preclude geographically 50% of the people in the state of Wisconsin from ever going to a Brewers game or a Packers game or everywhere else based on range. And I can't imagine 20,000 charging stations at, whether it be Miller Park or the private places around at this point. I'm not saying you can't evolve to that, but there's the philosophical discussion, but then there's the reality.
Right.
How do you make this happen? What do you do with batteries? How do you dispose of batteries? But this plant down there, like I said, it's an alternative energy source. I think it made the people in Saratoga happier than some of the other alternatives that were proposed for that land. But if you see a large-scale logging operation going on down there, that is the solar project in its infancy. We're going to have 200 to 250 people on site working on that project for the next 18 to 24 months.
I was going to say,
so, rental properties are tough right now. Hotel rooms are probably going to get somewhat scarce, but this is it's a huge project moving forward.
It's a huge one. It's an important one too. Yep. It's not just about our current citizens, but the future and our youngest citizens and those sorts of people and everything. Are there other things we should keep in mind when we're in that neck of the woods as far as when the project is going on? Yeah,
like I said, they're logging right now. I think about around the first week of June, they'll start some of it's a different permit, but, grubbing and some of the stump work, getting that out. By fall, they should start you'll see equipment being moved in, things like that, and then you'll see the actual construction phase begin. And like I said, that's going to take 18 to 24 months. We've met with the project managers, the vice presidents, presidents of the companies that are doing this. There's kind of a transition from savvy on developing to other companies building, and then eventually to the transmission of the power, through those stations. But it's a big project, and people keep asking me, what are they cutting all the wood for? And where's it going? I don't have that answer exactly on where's it going. I can tell you where they're cutting.
How excited are you for this project to be at this point where the ground is being broken literally and that kind of stuff after all the work that it takes to get to this point?
Yeah, that's always interesting, because some people don't realize how long you spend on some of these projects.
Right.
Like some of the things I've worked on have been, 18 years, 15 years in development. I mean, this goes back, we're way over 5.
Sure.
On this as we move forward. And you saw the efforts, in Saratoga where they didn't want the CAFO, large farming operation. And, solar energy is considered green energy. Yeah. Now, amazingly, I have some people that wanted the green energy but have called me because they're mad they're cutting the tree down. Yeah. So there's, how do you create balance? How do you create buffers? Right. How do you be environmentally sensitive while creating an environmentally sensitive project?
Right.
So, you deal with that. But yeah, to see something actually come to fruition after many, many years, I don't know. You really find some satisfaction in that.
You touched on it right away, where we don't see the grind. We don't see how the sausage is made necessarily. We just see the product. So it's important, I think, for all of us to note from time to time the work that gets put into these things by our board members, by so many people behind the scenes making these things happen, and community members reaching out and giving feedback like we were talking about before and everything. It's important. All this stuff, it's a team effort. None of this happens with just one person. Nobody gets through this with just one person. It always takes, we're all connected, so it's a team effort.
Well, I'm sure you've talked about this with our sheriff, and we'll certainly, as we get into shows moving on, one of the things we're going to talk about is a jail. Mm-hmm. And people, have called me and say, why do you want to build a jail? I don't want to build a jail. No. I have to build a jail probably.
Right.
I'm guessing. I don't know, but they go, well, you just decided to do this. I go, no. Yeah. 22 years ago when I was on the board, we've looked at every alternative. We've used those alternatives from electronic monitoring to housing, inmates out of county, to diversion programs, our adult drug treatment courts. We're looking at mental health courts and alcohol courts and all those others. When you've exhausted every single opportunity to do that, and you still have 100 to 150 more inmates than you can house, at some point you realize that those two lines financially cross. The cost to house out of county, those other things, with what it cost us to house in county, as well as the convenience of that to some extent when you're working with attorneys and judges and other people when you need them in. But it isn't like you decided today to do that. This is a 20-plus year decision where, and I can go back to my 22-plus years on the board, where I kind of made the comment years ago, if these two lines fiscally ever cross, where it's costing us more to house people out of county than it would to actually build, and taking into account everything. And that's what we're working on right now. Mm-hmm. The capital cost of construction, the personnel cost, all of those things involved, insurance, everything. If I can prove that that's more fiscally responsible, then it's probably a direction we should move. But at the end of the day, it's taken 22 years to even get to the point where we're saying, yeah, we've reached that crisis.
Right, and it's honestly one of those things too, where if the decision isn't made now, it's going to be made soon. We're just kicking the can kind of at this point because of, as you said, over these 20 years, that stuff has changed, and certainly the economic, the logistics of this are important. I always come back to the safety. The safety of our officers, the safety of our citizens, these kind of things, and why that is so important to me when I have the sheriff in front of me and that kind of stuff. Those are the things I'm thinking about. It's so important. The other things you mentioned there, absolutely, these all go hand in hand. But I keep coming back to that, like especially in this day and age, where almost every day we're hearing something about police officers or this or that and everything. Safety is important. Safety is key.
Yep.
It is vital.
Safety, staff recruitment, retention, mental health. All of those things going forward.
Boy,
and
that
then,
recruitment part especially too, Lance.
And then, the part that's always I have found fascinating is the recidivism. I can walk in that jail and 20 years later I see the same names. It can be generational. Yeah. You get caught in that. And then what can we do to provide some education so we don't deal with that? Because it isn't just the cost in the jail. We deal with it in our human services areas, what you would consider social services, in all of those aspects. So, it's not compartmentalized.
No.
It morphs across all of those boundaries, and the costs become phenomenal. And so you look at what's the best way to handle it.
And this affects so many people, and it's something that there are so many layers to this and so much depth to it. And we're thankful to have people like yourself and everything helping make these decisions and helping us as a community come up with the right answers for all this.
Well, go to the Wood County website, and look at the information. Check the agendas. I had just real quickly, and I know we're running out of time. I had a lady call me one day, and she said, this has been done, kind of in darkness. And I said, I've done 6 radio shows. It's been the headline article in the paper, and it's agendized every time it's out. That's a real word. And so it's been on the agenda.
I got it.
And the person actually said to me, he goes, I don't have time to read the paper, listen to the radio, or look at your agendas. And I'm going, well, to some extent, I guess that's why you need to be careful when you go to the ballot box and that you elect people that you trust to have done that homework. If you don't have time. I'm telling you to weigh in. But if you don't, think about it.
This idea that information should just be handed to you when you wake up in the morning and everything. No, you gotta work for this. You have to hunt for this. I spend every morning doing that. And I know that not everybody has the time to do those kind of things. You have to make the time. If you care about these issues, you've got to find the time.
Yeah, we're on a high-profile radio show, which everybody should be listening to, as well as public access.
Right.
We're handing it to you.
Absolutely. Lance, always a good time talking with you. The only problem is we just never have enough time. But we do appreciate everything you do for the community and joining us on the air here. Keep up the good work, man. And thanks again for being with us today.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
A big thank you to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, Kev, Joe, all you guys over there. We appreciate you so much. Keep up the great work. Go to your YouTube page and type in WRCM and subscribe to their page. Keep up to date on their things. And the website we mentioned earlier that Lance and I were talking about, co.wood.wi.us/county board. We'll be back with more Morning Magazine right here on AM 1320 WFHR.